Okay, so I'm on my way to a session, and I thought while I do these drives to sessions, might as well take a little time, do a little vlog for you, and just tell some stories. You know, I can sit there and tell you things about voiceover and how to get in it and all. What I found the most compelling, the most wisdom, was hearing other people's stories and seeing how they got involved in things that I like, and watching them and looking at their careers and studying how they do it. You know, everybody always asks, how do you get into voiceover? Love what voiceover is, do it to the best of your ability in all the ways that you can, and pursue it. That's really all I can tell you. I didn't have anything like this. I didn't have vlogs or YouTube channels or people showing me the ropes in any way. So I'm not saying that it's bad to have that. I'm saying back when I was a kid, you just went, this is what I want to do, so I'm going to pursue it. And that's the best advice I can give any of you that want to learn to do these things, is study, learn, watch, grow, do, you know? So let me tell you my story. When I was a kid, I loved voiceover. If you've seen my stage show, Talking to Myself, which you can see on my YouTube channel here in various forms, there's different versions of it. I tell the story of being 4 years old and deciding I wanted to be a voice actor and such, but from a very young age, I loved cartoons. I loved Mel Blanc, Don Messick, Dawes Butler, Paul Frees, June Foray, all these people. Then as I got older, I loved studying the newer voices, Jim Cummings, Billy West, Maurice LaMarche, Rob Paulson, Jess Harnell, all these wonderful actors, Mark Hamill, that did this. Frank Welker, my goodness. And I loved what they did, and so I watched a lot of cartoons. I've watched cartoons from day one till now, and never stopped watching them, studying them, looking at how, listening how, all of that. But when I was 16, I started doing stand-up comedy. When I was 12, I started writing my first stand-up comedy act, because I knew I wanted to be a comedian of some sort. I wanted to be a stand-up comic, and I wanted to be a voice actor. Those are the two parts of entertainment that I wanted to do. Never really had an interest to be an on-camera actor, a star, or anything. I wanted to be a star in comedy and voiceover. And in that, I do it to the best of my ability and have people enjoy it. So, so when I was 12, I wrote an act. And from 12 to 16, I fine-tuned that act, and it was a short act. And I did impressions and things. And then when I was 16, there was an open mic night at a local club in town, my hometown of Santa Barbara, where I'm from, Santa Barbara, California. You can look it up, Google Earth it or whatever if you want to know where Santa Barbara is. Santa Barbara is one of the most beautiful beach towns in the world, and growing up as a kid, I had absolutely no idea that I was so fortunate to live in such an amazing place that people travel all over the world to get to and see. But I grew up there, and there were little clubs that did open mic nights, they call them. Open mic nights, of course, are where anybody can get a chance to get up and get on mic and get on stage and perform. Usually it was for singers. And at this particular club, it was called Joe's 2. It was a little comedy, or it wasn't a comedy club, but rather it was a little bar, kind of a hole-in-the-wall bar, really. Joe's Cafe was very famous and down the street, and they had done so well, they created this place, Joe's 2, which again was just this tiny little place. And they had this little stage with a stand-up upright piano, rather, on the stage, and they would have bands play, just small bands, because, of course, it was a small place. It was a very narrow, kind of shoebox-like place. And the guy that ran the place's name was Bud. Not unlike Bud Friedman, I guess, but it wasn't a comedy club. It was just a bar. And Bud had I think he had like a big scar on his face, and he wore Hawaiian print shirts. And I called up and said, I see you got open mic night. Can I come and do it? Yeah, sure, kid. I said, well, I'm 16. They said, well, you can only come in, do your act, and then you got to leave because you're underage. See, if you're under 21, you can't be in a bar. But they let me go in to perform. So I said, all right, I'm doing it. So I had my act, I had everything ready, and 16 years old, I got up on that stage, for, I don't know, there's probably 20 people in the club. And it was the owner's, Bud, this guy owner, the manager or owner or whatever, it was his birthday. So the guy that I talked to on the phone said, do something for Bud for his birthday because it's his birthday, so work that into your act. I'm thinking, okay. So I was, this was the 80s. This was what, 1984 or so. And I'm 16 years old. I go into this club, Joe's 2. I got my jacket, my pinstripe white with blue pinstripe jacket with the collar up and the sleeves pushed up because it was the 80s, and a really thin tie that was all shiny metallic blue, and I had matching high top Converse, and I brought my saxophone on stage. I played the saxophone ever since I was in junior high, 7th grade, for those of you that went to middle school, and so I knew how to play the sax, and I kept it on me, and I never played it actually on stage. I used it as a crutch, just to, or as a kind of a punchline rather. So if I was going to segue, I'd act as though I was going to play it, and then I'd go into another joke. So I used it as a prop, really, not a crutch, but a prop. But it was a crutch for me because it was a safety net. You may have heard, if you watched the JAT show, I talked about this with Tom Wilson. So I got up there and I told my jokes and stuff, and I had, I don't know, jokes about laundry and life and all this stuff. I have the phone. I had a bit how we had a cordless phone, and my mom was so used to phones with a cord on it that she would stay near the base of the thing, and I'd say, Mom, you could go away from the phone, and it was, I don't know, but it was funny. I got a few laughs. And then I did some impressions. I did some Michael J. Fox. I did some stuff, and then I did, for Bud, at the end of the whole thing, I sang Happy Birthday. Now, like I say, there was probably 15, 20 people in the crowd, and there were literally guys in like biker outfits with the, just like you'd see in a movie, with the cut off sleeves, the leather vest, and no shirt, underneath, and tattoos, and dark sunglasses in a club at night, wearing dark sunglasses. And these guys liked me. They liked me. They were laughing at me. And that was great. Not laughing at me, they were laughing with me, I should say. They liked what I did. They were encouraging. They were great. And so at the end, I sang Happy Birthday to Bud, who was at the bar. He was working the bar. And there was a spotlight, and he put it on me, and he was shining it on me and clapping and laughing. And I sang it like Bill Murray from the old Saturday Night Live bits, where he would do the lounge lizard. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, you nutty cookie pie, to you. And I'm doing all this. I'm 16. I was scared to death, but I'm performing. I'm doing it, and they liked it. I'll never forget the intro too. I'll jump back a little. It was like they had a band that was really a rockin' band. This guy was just smacking the keys on that keyboard on the piano, and really great. And then he comes in and goes, okay, now we got a funny guy. Get up here, come on. And that was my intro. And I got up there and did it all, and they laughed. And I always say, had they not laughed, I don't know if I would have tried it again. Because it wasn't until a couple times later doing stand-up where I started to kind of bomb and get heckled a few times and had to deal with all of that. And that was hard. But the first few times I didn't. First few times I did good, and that's, I think, what allowed me to get back up on stage and do it again and again. And so that was 16, and I would go and do the open mic nights at the bars after that. And like I say, just go in and then leave once I performed. And you didn't get paid or anything. It was just time on stage. And I had like a 4 or 5 minute act. And so then I went to the local radio station, which was in my hometown, KTYD, K-Tide, 99.9. And it was a classic rock station. It was a great station. I had grown up listening to it. And they played everything, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, all the great rock stuff. And I went in and I said, how do you get into radio? And the DJ that was there is still a good friend of mine to this day, and he's still a very successful disc jockey and motivational speaker and comedian and person, Terry James. You can find him online, Terry James, and he's on Twitter. And Terry was so kind. He was the DJ that happened to be there when the receptionist called and said, hey, can you come up and give a kid a tour of the radio station? And he gave me a tour of the radio station and showed me the place where they were on air and everything. And then they took my number and stuff, and I said, I'd love to help out. And I literally started sweeping up. I'd just go in for free and sweep up. And then they gave my name to Drew Hillies, who's also still a friend of mine. Drew is a very successful businessman now, and Drew was the promotion director. And so Drew would give me bumper stickers to hand out at concerts, and there was we had a video van, the K-Tide video van, which was this huge van that Coca-Cola sponsored, and so it looked like a big can of Coca-Cola with the K-Tide logo on it. And in the back was this gigantic TV, and it was hooked up. You had to plug it into a generator, and we would play music videos. We'd go park it at places, at concerts or at the beach, and play music and music videos and play the radio station. And it was just a great way to publicize the radio station. And so I got to drive the van and hand out bumper stickers and do all that. And I immersed myself in this radio station. I spent all my days and nights there just hanging out, being available, and watching and learning. And all the DJs there, still friends of mine to this day. Mark Avery, Jane Asher, Terry James, wonderful people. And I would just sit in and watch them do their shows. They'd let me watch them. And then I would go into the production room at night. There was another room they had with a multi-track recorder, which was all tape, audio tape, big pancakes of tape, they called them, and 2-track and 4-track recorders, and eventually we got an 8-track recorder. And I taught myself how to use all this stuff by watching them, studying what they did. Mark Avery was the production director there, and he knew all the multi-tracking stuff, and he showed me a lot, and I learned a lot by watching him. And then at night I would go in and make my own shows, fake shows. I'd get records, and I'd get all the old cards that they used from the night before, the playlists and the commercials from the night before that on air. And I'd use those to make fake shows that I would put on a cassette tape and give to the program director, who was Russ Motla, who is, again, still a good friend of mine to this day. And Russ was so encouraging. So how did I do it? I did it by watching. I did it by taking it all in, being excited about it, by loving it all, and experimenting, and giving it out to the people that I trusted, that did what they did, that were professional at it, and taking their advice and listening to them, and trying to learn and grow however I could. And by the time the year had ended, I was the overnight DJ there. The overnight DJ one night didn't show up, and nobody knew where he was, and they called me, and I had been there all day and night working on my fake shows and hanging out and sweeping up and helping out in whatever way I could. And they said, "You're on, kid." And I went on just like out of a movie. And I went on, and I did the midnight to 6 overnight shift one night. And Russ then listened to it and critiqued it and said, "Don't do this, do that, don't do that." To say, don't say and if you don't know what to say, just pause. Be comfortable in the pauses. And I learned how to be a DJ by being a DJ. I eventually then started DJing dances, all my old high school dances and stuff, because I was still the age of most of my friends were still in school. I had actually left school early. After 10th grade, I dropped out. I'm not like kids drop out. I'm telling you, that's what I did. I'm not proud of the fact that I'm a high school dropout, but I would love to get my GED and change that someday. Maybe I will. But I've had great success and very fortunate so far. And I went against the odds in that. So don't think that you can just drop out of school and make it. It was a different time then too. You got to remember that was 30 plus years ago. So all my friends were still in school, so I would come and be the DJ for all the dances. I was kind of the school big fish in a little pond, because here I had made it. I had become this DJ in town, big name in a small town. And I would DJ those, and I would DJ weddings and parties and local events. And I had the big turntables and such, and I did that on the side while I also eventually became the overnight DJ, and then eventually became the production director, writing and directing all the commercials, because I loved creating voices. And so I would stay there until all hours of the night writing these commercials on an old typewriter, and I'd create the voices, and nobody else would be in there to do the voices with me, so I'd do them. Hey Bob, how you doing? I'm doing all right, how you doing? And I would just create them, or I would do parodies of things. I would do Cheech and Chong. Hey man, what do you think of this? Oh yeah man, that's a great product, man. And it was, it was just having fun doing it all and creating all these fun commercials that everybody in the city liked because they were just fun and they were different, they were unique. And so I did a lot of that, became the production director, then eventually became the 8 to midnight DJ, and then eventually got fired because that's what happens in radio a lot of times is you get fired. Radio stations don't tend to keep the same staff for long periods. I was there for quite a few years, from 17 till I was 21, so I was very fortunate to be there for a long time. And a new program director came in and fired all of us, and that's pretty common. They want to go a different direction. They want to change things up. I was the first guy to get fired. And I moved to North Carolina, took a job at a radio station there as the production director and the morning show producer. I produced all of the comedy bits. I wrote and I just made up all these fun comedy bits and things. And I loved doing it, but I knew I wanted to do voiceover in Hollywood. So I wrote my mom worked at a private school in Santa Barbara where a lot of very wealthy kids and celebrities' kids went. And Robert Zemeckis was coming to speak. And I wrote a pilot, a presentation, a pitch for a Back to the Future cartoon. And this was before the Back to the Future cartoon came out, actually. And I voiced Doc and Marty in it. And Great Scott, Marty, we're in a cartoon. What's happened? Whoa, Doc, this is heavy. Look at, what are we doing? Well, let's go back in time and teach kids about history. And I pitched this show that would be Doc and Marty back in time and teaching kids about history and things like that and making it fun and educational. And got it to Robert Zemeckis, and then he sent me a polite decline letter. Thank you very much, but no thanks. And then within a year, they had created and come up with a Back to the Future cartoon that starred my friend David Kaufman as Michael J. Fox, actually, and he did a great job. But I didn't make it into the cut of that. So I then moved back home and got a job at an easy listening station. And the day before my wedding, my wife and I, high school sweethearts, have been together, been in the marching band together. We've been together since she was about 16 years old and I was 17. And we were about to get married, 19 and 20, 21. Well, yeah, I'm like 2 years ahead of her. So she was 19, I was 21, that's right. So 16 and 18 when we were dating. And the day before my wedding, I'd come home, I really had no prospects except for this weekend's job at the easy listening station, which was confusing because I was James Taylor playing James Taylor songs. Anyways, the old radio station that fired me, K-Tide, they fired that program director and they were bringing back people and they offered me my old job back. So the day before my wedding, I got my job back and it was great. And I started producing the morning show and I was the production director again. And I met up with a friend, Pete Hansen, who was the morning DJ. And Pete and I started writing and producing comedy bits. And the funny thing is where I'm talking, the place I'm about to talk about is literally, I'm passing it right now. We went to work in Los Angeles for a place called Premier Radio Networks, and I'm literally looking at the building right as we're driving right here. It's funny how it timed out. Right out here on Ventura Boulevard. Premier Radio Networks. At the time, they were actually farther down, but so we would write and voice and produce fake commercials, Saturday Night Live type sketches, fake phone calls for radio stations across the country. Rick Dees, Howard Stern, all these guys, Man Cow, Jonathan Brandmeier, all these famous DJs. They would buy our services and then they could plug our stuff in their shows to make, to add to what they had already done. And so we came up with characters and such, and I would do bits. Guys that call into the radio station, ask for requests and things, and it was all fake stuff, but it was fun, and the listeners wouldn't know. So I made my living doing that for 12 and a half years. I recorded and wrote and produced over 8,000 comedy bits for the Premier Radio Network over that time. And I have them all still in an archive on a hard drive now. I should put them up on my website or something for you. A lot of them were very edgy and raunchy, kind of funny, kind of, again, Saturday Night Live type comedy bits. And a lot of them were way ahead of their time, and a lot of them got ripped off from people later on in years. In fact, even one of our bits got ripped off and was on Saturday Night Live. I mean, almost verbatim script. But, you know, that happens. And so all this time, I had a home studio I had built. And this was back, I still had a multi-track recorder we were recording these on, and then the dawn of digital was coming out, and I learned Sonic Solutions was the first digital recording system, and I learned how to edit digitally on that on a Macintosh. And then Pro Tools came out, and I learned all of that there as well. But that was through my years of working at Premiere, and during all that time, I had this home studio, and I wanted to be a voice actor, and I would make demo tapes for my friends that were actors that were doing voiceover. And I'd say, in return for this, I won't charge you, but if you can take my demo to your agent and do a pitch for me that, you know, I'm a guy that's, because I had already had years and years of experience in radio and voiceover and writing and characters and comedy and stand-up. And I had created a pretty good demo. It had this thing called 60 Voices in 60 Seconds, where I went through all these characters. It's still on my website, you can see it. And then I did this one called Master Tune Theater, where I did all the Looney Tunes characters doing Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks, you know. And it was a lot of fun. And so I had this demo, and I got it out there, and eventually an agent listened, because that's the problem, is just getting an agent to actually listen to your demo. And eventually one listened. Mark Quinn at Abrams, Rubloff, and Lawrence. My friend Bern Offit had taken it in, and Bern is a very talented actor. You can follow him on Instagram and Twitter and such. And that was, the rest is history, as you say. I got my SAG card before that, though. I had joined the union thanks to Disney and my dear friend Brian Nefsky at Disney, who I still work for at times. Brian, through my friend Mark Jonathan Davis. Mark Jonathan Davis is Richard Cheese, for those of you that know the music of Richard Cheese. He created a wonderfully funny lounge lizard band where he sings contemporary songs in a lounge lizard style. And Mark is very talented, and Mark was the one that had hired me at Premiere Radio. So Mark was doing some stuff for Disney, and they needed some voices for this new thing they were calling California Adventure. And so they said, can you come in and do some voices? And you get paid, and we'll Taft-Hartley you into the union. Taft-Hartley is the way you get into the union a lot of times, into the Screen Actors Guild. And so it was a wonderful opportunity for me, and I got into the union. I became a Screen Actors Guild member, and I did voices for California Adventure, and did all sorts of different voices on those, and rides and attractions there, and did this one thing that was a big car, an old car, where they gutted it and made it into a Coca-Cola thing with ice and big Cokes in the Coca-Cola in the back trunk and everything. And playing on there was this huge stuffed ape sitting in the front seat, and playing out of the radio was this, "We interrupt this program to bring you this special news bulletin. Aliens have landed on Earth." And I did all the voices in it. I did the women and children, I did the ape, I did the announcer, and it just rolled on a loop. And that was one of the things I did. I also did at Dinosaur, the ride, Countdown to Extinction was the name of it. I think it's called Dinosaur now, at the Animal Kingdom in Disney World. And if you go there still, you can still hear me when you're in the gift shop, exiting through the gift shop. "Dinosaurs, sir!" It sounds like Michael J. Fox, that's me. And a bunch of the stuff I did is gone now. There was a ride called Rocket Rods, and I was the voice of Mission Control. Michael Eisner chose my voice. I like that guy's voice, put it in there. And I was the voice of your Mission Control. This is Mission Control. We are clear for liftoff, and all that. It was great fun. And those were some of my first things as a Screen Actors Guild actor. And Abrams, Rubloff, and Lawrence picked me up as a client and took me on, and some of the first stuff I did was voice doubling Michael J. Fox for things like Stuart Little, and then Atlantis: The Lost Empire came out, and they needed him to do the TV show, and he wasn't up for doing the show, and so I got to fill in for him on the TV show, which was supposed to be a full season, and we ended up only doing, we recorded 18 episodes, and then 3 of them got turned into a direct-to-DVD sequel called Atlantis Milo's Return, which you can now see. And I always worried the whole time that I wasn't really sounding enough like Michael J. Fox. And I listen to it, and I don't think I sound much like him. I'm a little higher and a little more, but Greg Weisman, who was the director of it, who of course directed Gargoyles and has done so many wonderful things, and Young Justice and such, was my director, and he was so kind. He's like, don't worry about that, just be Milo. And so I was. And that was a wonderful experience. That was the first TV show I really got to work on. And I worked with Philip Morris, the wonderfully talented Philip Morris. Cree Summer was, of course, Keita, my girlfriend in the show. Corey Burton, amazing Corey Burton. Frank Welker was my lava dog. It was an amazing, amazing show. We had a wonderful time. So many wonderful guest stars. And that's kind of the beginning of it for me. And then from there, I had done, let me backtrack though. I had done a lot of voice work for Japanese companies when I was like 19, 20, 21. I was doing those out of Jimmy Messina. So Loggins and Messina, the band Kenny Loggins and Jim Messina had Loggins and Messina. And Jimmy was somebody that I had become friendly with through the radio station. And he had a recording studio, beautiful recording studio for recording music. A lot of Kenny Loggins stuff was recorded there and other bands. And he needed somebody to come in and archive tapes. And I, of course, had the experience working at the radio station. And so I was doing all that for him. And at one point they said, well, do you do voice? And I said, yeah, that's what I want to do. And so they were working with these Japanese companies that were needing voice actors. And this was non-union work at the time, of course, because this was when I was younger. And it was for some video games. I did a game called Distrega. And the very first video game I did, I think I was 20 years old, maybe 21. It was called Emmett, and it was time backwards, T-I-M-E, E-M-I-T, time backwards. They needed somebody that could age backwards. So they needed someone that could start as a little kid and then eventually turn into an old man, who was by the end a very old man. Reverse that. Started as a very old man and then eventually became a very young man. That's what it was, sorry. And because it was backwards, Emmett. And I don't know if that game still exists anywhere, but that came out. And then I did language tapes for Japanese language tapes for kids to learn English in Japan. And I still have copies of them somewhere, but it was things like, Brian has a ball. His ball is blue. What color is Brian's ball? Blue. Blue. And it was to teach kids English, like grade schoolers. So there are some kids in Japan that learned how to speak English from good old Titus, or Ratchet, because it was me doing basically Titus' voice. And little did I know, it was a precursor to all the work I would do for Final Fantasy X and all that years and years later when I was, many more years later. So that was my first work, and then my first Screen Actors Guild work was for Disney, and then after that was for Disney doing Atlantis and Stuart Little, Michael J. Fox doubling. And from there it all just kind of snowballed and started going. I was the voice of ABC, the promo voice for ABC for a while, and that was a lot of fun. And then I got to just do so many wonderful shows, Powerpuff Girls, Scooby-Doo, Johnny Bravo, it all just happened from there. Once people started hearing the voices I could do and things, and there it is. So I'm almost at my session, and I can't tell you what the session is because, that's how we are. But I hope you've enjoyed this time hanging out with me on the drive out to the studio and learning a little bit more about the James Arnold Taylor story. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not. Please spread the word about the channel. I'd like to grow this channel as much as I can. I'm trying to give you as many different things of content as I can each week, from little short, fun little things like A Moment with a Master and Tell Titus a Tale, to Clone Wars Conversations and the JAT Show, and then these vlogs, and more to come. So please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and thanks so much for hanging out with me. We'll do another drive real soon. I'll tell you more about my life. See ya.